What's good, everyone? It's Noah. I'm glad to be back on DMVSportsZone. I've been pretty busy with Sport AI, but I'm glad to finally be back on the channel to provide some content. And today we're going to be talking about the 2022 NHL Draft for the Washington Capitals. I know that there's not a lot of big storylines this year outside of one name, Shane Wright. I know a lot of casual fans may recognize that name. He was granted exceptional status a couple years ago in the Canadian Hockey League, meaning he could be playing at that semi-professional level at only 15 years old. He's joining the ranks of Steven Stamkos, John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, all players that have gone on to become all-stars and superstars in the National Hockey League. But surprisingly, I know he was the de facto #1 pick for a long time. He actually went fourth to the Seattle Kraken, and instead Slovakia makes history with Juraj Slafkovský going first overall. The Montreal Canadiens took the raw prospect, but I think has a higher ceiling. He could eventually become a Marian Gaborik type superstar player. Don't get me wrong, Shane Wright's still going to be a great player in the league, but it kind of makes sense, especially after these past couple of years have developed. But besides that, we want to focus on the Capitals, obviously. I'm going to give a draft grade overall, and I'm going to go through pick by pick and the big trade that went through in the NHL draft. But before we get started, again, all my fantasy sports data comes from Sport AI, the mobile app that is optimizing fantasy sports analytics. If you want to know more about the app and download it today, link is in the bio. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they tied him out.
You know when you're at the USA Cup, you're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act when we gon' be right back. When we gon' be right here. We gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down.
My thoughts on the Capitals draft. If I can give it a grade overall, I'm actually give it a B+. I think the Capitals did a great job addressing all the needs that we really need to address, which is more particularly the forward depth. Obviously, OVECHKIN, Backstrom, all these guys are getting older. I know time flies. Even Kuznetsov's getting a little bit older, as well as John Carlson. So we had to make a risk, take some risks, really find the superstars to carry on the next generation. I think overall the Capitals did a good job. I will say in the middle of the draft, I think we didn't take the right players, but of course we'll talk about that later in the video. Let's talk about our first overall pick, 20th overall, Ivan Miroshnichenko. Great pick, but there's a lot of question marks, so for now I'm going to give it a B. The reason I give this a B is I really believe that there were other players that the Capitals could have taken. One player in particular is Daniel Yurov, who went 24th overall to the Minnesota Wild, another Russian forward. So a little bit more about Ivan Miroshnichenko. He's a true left wing and a right-handed shooter, which is why I got a lot of comparisons to Alexander Ovechkin. To further support those claims, he was playing in the SHL, the Super Hockey League, for Omsk Krylyska, if I pronounce that, Krylia, which is the same level of hockey that Ovechkin was playing at his age at 18. He had 10 points, 6 assists for 16 points, 51 games, as well as was the captain for Russia, who won the gold medal, the Ivinka Gretzky Cup. So that's the thing is, initially people go, oh, his statistics aren't that great, but you got to think about that he's playing not in a junior league. He's playing the second tier of professional hockey in Russia, right behind the KHL, which is arguably the second best league in the world, at 18 years old. Extremely raw talent. He's going to take a lot more time to develop, but his ceiling is much higher. Another red flag that coming into the draft, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, but fortunately was able to receive the correct medical treatment in Russia and is expected to make a full recovery. Of course, though, that's always a question mark for the first couple of years. Can he stay healthy? Will it be an impact on his career? I'm hoping it won't be, but that's kind of why you have to give him a B for now. He is much more of a raw prospect, and with the health concerns, he may be a contributor right away this upcoming season, but not in a huge capacity. It's about the future. Daniel Yurov is a more NHL-ready prospect. I believe that he can make a more immediate impact with a safer floor, but I understand the Capitals' decision with Ivan Miroshnichenko being that left wing, kind of being that guy that we can expect to come in and eventually replace Ovechkin, as he is getting up there in age. Only has a couple more years left. This is going to be vital for the Capitals to find that superstar left wing So I understand that's why I give it a B, because despite the risks, I believe the ceiling is much higher than Urov and other prospects we could have selected in this year's draft. So the next thing, big trade, Vida Vanacek to the New Jersey Devils with our 46th pick in exchange for their 37th pick and 70th pick. This was inevitable. We'd have to pick between Ilya Samsonov or Vida Vanacek, both young goaltenders. We can't afford to keep both. I personally agree with this decision. Very similar with Michael Neuwirth and Semyon Varlamov from a couple years ago. Again, the Czech is the odd man out. Gets traded away. Ilya Samsonov, we invested first-round draft capital into him. He does have the higher ceiling. I know he was a little bit more inconsistent than Vanacek, but his ceiling is extremely high. And it's really worth the risk to allow him to finally be the de facto number one goalie. Past couple of years, Samsonov been slowly developing as a 1A, 1B type player. For the past 2 years, finally we got a chance to start. I think this is necessary. Even if there are growing pains, we have to see what we have in him as a true number one. A good comparison, another Russian goaltender for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Andrei Vasilevsky. Took a couple years to develop, but now is arguably the best goaltender in the league and of this generation. I'm not saying Ilya Samsonov will become Vasilevsky, but he does have ceiling to become the all-star goalie. Vida Vanacek is just a solid starter. I don't think his ceiling is much higher than this. So to get this great draft capital in exchange for him and still have a young goalie like Samsonov was a huge win for the Capitals. Particularly with our next pick. With that 37th pick, we picked Ryan Chesley of the United States National Development Team program. I'm going to give this pick an A. I believe Ryan Chesley can be the steal of this draft. An extremely gifted offensive defenseman with 22 goals and 17 assists in 59 games for the United States National Development Team program. He led all defenders in goals and was actually top 5 on the entire team in goals, which is extremely rare for a defenseman. Kind of fitting, our number one defenseman right now, John Carlson, is another Minnesota native. Chesley's also from Minnesota. A great mentor for him. A natural right-handed shot is rare to find a power play quarterback of that type of caliber, especially in the second round. This was a home run pick by the Washington Capitals. Obviously, off of film, he needs to work on his defensive instincts, his positioning, but that could be taught. A lot of times, offensive instincts for offensive defensemen cannot be taught. It's natural hockey IQ. And as a result, he already has above offensive skills for an NHL defenseman. He has a very high ceiling as well. He can eventually become an all-star, possibly an all-NHL type defenseman. To get him in the second round is an absolute steal. He is a little bit more raw, which is exactly why he fell in the first place, especially with a lot of other big headliners on the blue line. A lot of people trending towards a more bigger two-way defenseman. But we do need immediately a more offensive-minded depth on the blue line. Chesley can immediately come in, be a second-line power play quarterback, or at least be developed into one in a short period of time. Obviously, he has a lot to work on defensively, but has decent size, 6'1". It reminds me a lot of Torrey Krug, another American, with even more size. This is a home run pick. I think Ryan Chesley will be the steal of this draft. This is an absolute A draft pick. Our third pick is Alexander Svetsalev, another left wing like Ivan, coming out of HV71 junior team, which is in Sweden. Had 51 points, 45 games. Looks great on paper. Was the captain for the gold-winning U18 Swedish team that actually played against Team USA and Ryan Chesley. So obviously has the international experience, international leadership. I'm going to unfortunately give this pick a C+, because this is really a case where there were plenty of other options that would fit the Capitals in the short term and in the long term. Oscar Peterson or Elias Peterson, another Swedish player, ironically got drafted to the Vancouver Canucks, who also have their superstar, other Elias Peterson, kind of weird, they have the same name. But I believe they were the good two-way or offensive-minded defensemen that we continue to add. They're also left-handed, so add a little more depth on that side of the puck. I don't think that Alexander Svetsalev is an absolute terrible pick, but his ceiling in terms of his skating and his scoring ability is pretty capped. He's kind of right where he is. He's not going to progress that much further, particularly because his skating ability isn't very natural. He's a decent skater, a decent scorer, just an average player. But if you're going to pick them in the third round, I really do think that it's still a high draft capital pick. There are a lot of other better options, including from Sweden. So I'm going to give this pick a C to C+. Hopefully you can prove me wrong, but right now I don't think it's a great pick for the Capitals. They played a little bit too safe on a team that needs to take big risks to replace the superstars we have now that are almost at the end of their career. So for our next pick, another Swede, Ludwig Persson, another left wing. We're loaded up on left wings this draft. 61 points in 41 games for Frölunda's junior team, playing the same level as Alex Svatolev. Number 1 in scoring. I will give this pick a B-. He's kind of similar to Alexander Svatolev in terms of his ceiling isn't super high, but his floor is pretty safe. The difference is this is in the 4th round. I think he was the best available pick for us as we really want to load up on players. He does have better size than Svatolev, and it has a similar two-way game potential like Lars Eller with a little bit more offensive talent. So we can get a 3rd, 4th line, maybe even emergency 2nd line guy, play that power play, play that penalty kill in a couple years. On the 4th round, that's a great pick. Obviously, he's a safe pick, though. He's not one of those raw projects that has a bigger potential, boom or bust type of potential. Just a decent pick, so B- here. I think that he can contribute in a couple years. He will have to spend another year, I think, at least one more year in Sweden on HV71 senior team, and then maybe a year or two in Hershey, and then he can eventually make the Capitals roster. But he is a couple years away, but he's a 4th round pick. Decent pick. I'm going to give that a B-. Next pick, Jake Cherabella, 149th overall from the WHL. This pick is going to be very interesting. I'm going to give it a C+, because, yes, it's a late-round pick, and he is that classic late-round pick fit, undersized, 5'10", but a great energy guy, scrappy. He reminds me a lot of Paul Byron, if you guys remember who that is, another undersized center that played, his prime was on those Montreal Canadiens, a little bit of Calgary Flames, those teams that went pretty deep in the playoffs. These guys are important glue guys, but unlike Paul Byron, he lacks natural skating ability and speed and has only an average offensive game. As a result, there's a very high chance he will never become a full-time NHL player. Obviously, there's a lot of young stars nowadays that are under 6 feet. Short Kings are winning in the NHL right now, but those players offer either 1, speed, 2, skill, 3, both. Caravella is kind of a Swiss Army knife. But he's the master of none. But he kind of does everything pretty well. So obviously, it would seem like I would give him a higher grade. But right now, I'll give him a C+. I mean, he's just a really average draft pick. I don't know if he has. Like I said, there's a very high chance he will never make the NHL on a full-time basis. He could be a great energy guy. Reminds me a lot of Ryan Bourque, who was on the Hershey Bears for a long time. But Ryan Bourque was more of a scorer. So Caravella could be an energy guy going forward for the Capitals on that 3rd or 4th line. But long-term, there's not a high chance that he can even make the NHL in the first place, which is why I'm going to give this a C or a C+, particularly after I talk about the next 2 picks. So the final 2 picks that we had in this draft, Ryan Hoffer, 181st overall. This, to me, is an A- pick. Why? Even later than Jay Carabella, but he reminds me a lot of Tom Wilson, another Canadian Hockey League guy. He's a big physical forward. But one thing I really want to pay attention to is if you see his film, he's a decent skater, but he actually has a sneaky offensive game. Was 6th on his team in points, but 1st in penalty minutes. A very scrappy kind of power forward type of player, and in the playoff, 10 points, 6 games, not bad at all. He does have actually a lot more talent offensively than I think people realize, and especially on a Capitals team that has developed guys like Tom Wilson. We had Mike Knuble playing back in the day. We do like that big, capable, physical right wing, more of a true right wing. Carabella's at center. I mean, a bunch of left wingers already. He provides a lot of depth. I think he can be an excellent pick, especially this late in the draft. We wanted to kind of get that raw project that has that, high risk but high reward type of play. I think that Ryan Hoffer is that type of player. That's why I'm going to give this an A- pick. I think he can develop into Tom Wilson in the right circumstances. So this is a great pick in the late rounds for me. And finally, as our 7th round pick, we picked David Gucciardi, 213th overall from Michigan State. I'm going to give this pick an A. It's kind of weird to give a 7th round pick an A, but I watched the film. This is a great pick for the Washington Capitals. He can have the potential to become a second pairing level guy at the NHL level. Why? He's an extremely gifted skater. He is a little bit undersized for a two-way defenseman, but his stats don't lie. Led all of Michigan State defensemen and forwards in goals. This guy's not really known for scoring, but he still was first amongst freshmen in goals, 5th overall on the team at block shots with 44 this season. And again, you have to consider that NCAA hockey is a lot different from other NCAA sports. A lot of these guys that are coming, from the USHL, NAHL, the Junior American system, the CHL in Canada, Europe, even Asia, a lot of these players are coming in much older, having played in their junior systems. So a lot of these guys are anywhere from 21 to 25 years old. So being a younger, more true freshman type of age player, David Gucciardi did really well in that situation. He has very natural skating instincts, very smooth skater, and also has, like I said, potential to have a lot more offensive ability than is first given. So that's why I think Ryan Hoffer and Gucciardi are perfect late round picks because, worst comes to worst, they're just depth guys in the minor leagues, but at best they can become valuable contributors for the Capitals. And for a 6th, 7th round pick, that's very, very low risk, high reward there. I think this is a great pick. Amongst all the late round picks, including the 4th round beyond, I think David Gucciardi has the best chance of being that gem from the draft. Obviously, 3rd round beyond, you expect him to make the team, but David Gucciardi, I think in a couple years, can become a very valuable player. He's going to have to spend more time in Michigan State, but I think when he's ready, he'll become a valuable contributor on the Capitals. For a 7th round draft pick, that's an A for me. So overall, yeah, that's kind of how it averages out to around a B plus grade for this year's entire draft class. I think we took the right risks taking the question mark in Ivan Miroshnichenko because he does have the much higher ceiling. And Ryan Chesley, I really think steal the draft. Very hard to find a natural right-handed defenseman that is a puck mover and a goal scorer. We have Carlson, but he's older. He could be a perfect replacement. But in the middle of the draft, I think we played it pretty safe, maybe even too safe. As a result, that's why this draft class slips down a little bit. But those late-round picks, keep an eye on Ryan Hoffer and David Gucciardi in the next couple of years. I think they can be great draft steals. Capitals have done really well with developing talent in these past couple of drafts. I think we've gotten a lot better at doing that than in the past. Jakub Vrana, Burakovsky ended up being kind of, I wouldn't say draft busts, but they definitely ended up not contributing to the team as much for their draft stock. So I think that the Capitals did the right decision with getting more raw prospects and really betting on this new organization, the new management to kind of develop these players. And I think that's going to shift the culture of the Capitals, and it's very important to have those young guys that you can kind of take care of. So yeah, that's my final recap of the 2020